good evening. Thank you for having me here to speak to you tonight. You, the 40th graduating class of Lake Braddock Secondary, are about to venture out into some great unknown. And it could be very comforting at this vulnerable time and place to be soothed and or bolstered by some sage wisdom that will help you ease the process of moving to the next phase of your lives. I have to admit, that's a kind of intimidating task. It presumes that I have some good advice to give, and that my advice will be of some worth to each of you, individually speaking. It's true that I was once 18, and I once graduated from high school. And I can even distantly recall these things and have put them into the context of a longer life. I've also spent the last 16 years of my professional life in the school you will soon call your alma mater. You and I do, therefore, share some similarity of experience. And since I am just slightly older, I might be of some use tonight. On the other hand, I'm also a high school teacher, and many of you may be thinking, look where he ended up. Why would I ever listen to anything this guy has to say? I'm trying to leave high school in my rearview mirror, and you want me to take seriously the advice of someone who is still in a high school, well into his advanced age? Fair point. But I'm the guy you asked to speak tonight. Kind of stuck with me, at least for the next 15 minutes or so. And I am actually honored, sincerely so, to be the one who gets to try to give the meaningful advice tonight. So, here goes. I decided to talk to you tonight about courage, about what courage means, and how you demonstrate it, and when, and why. My literature classes this year have been, in part, struggling with the notion of the hero in modern fiction. Gone, it seems, are the days when a hero was someone like Odysseus or Jason, admittedly flawed men who nonetheless stood as beacons for their civilizations and defenders of their community's values, who risked life and limb to venture into the unknown world, to tell their people's stories, and to return with treasure and fame. Nor do we have heroes like Joan of Arc anymore, willing to sacrifice her own life at the burning stake to defend her spiritual understandings of God in the face of an officious orthodoxy grown drunk on its own power and arrogance. Today, in literature, it seems heroic simply to find ways to endure, to survive from day to day, to perhaps laugh and appreciate beauty and behave decently. Some see this as a degradation of the classical ideal, a sign we have lost our ability as creators of art to craft heroes who desire greatness or who aspire to lofty places. I choose to see it differently. I like to see the modern hero's position as very like the circumstances each of us find ourselves in, and that consequently we are called to be heroic in the ways that matter, intimately in our own individual lives. Heroic with a small h, if you will. Courageous in our own personal contexts. You and I will likely never be called upon to save a baby from a burning building, to cut the red, or is it blue, wire before the timer ticks down to 0 and the nuke blows up. We will not, it is fairly certain, be on the receiving end of the bat signal. It's far more likely we will be assisting the commissioner by plugging it into the wall or making sure it's pointed at the right cloud bank over Gotham. And then we'll check our watch, wait for the man in black to arrive. No, the opportunities for heroism, for the demonstration of courage in our own lives will be smaller, though only in scope, and not in their ultimate meaning in our lives and in the lives of those we love, or those whose lives we touch. In that way, our courage is meaningful above all else, or so I'd like to argue to you this evening. It is possible, since no epic poems will be written about any of our lives, that we have allowed ourselves to think that we need not concern ourselves with courage, that heroism is not our business, but the job of others who have more prominence, more celebrity, more money, or more power. That, I think, is laziness. That is an abdication of our essential human roles. No one, I submit to you, on her deathbed has said with her dying breath that she wished she'd only played things a bit more safe, that she regretted that she hadn't remained even more quiet in the face of discrimination and injustice, that if only she had been more meek in the face of power, she'd have lived a more satisfied life. By the way, why in these kinds of parables is the person always on her deathbed? That's why I'm talking to you about these things tonight, I guess. Because you are just at the beginning of your lives, as the people you will choose to become, and at the end of your lives as the people we, your parents, your teachers, and your coaches have trained and molded you to be. You aren't on your deathbeds. You're in cribs and playpens. I just saw Brian Thompson elbow his neighbor and whisper, "Did he just call us a bunch of babies?" No, it's a metaphor. I mean to say you are fresh, as yet unscathed, ready to start things anew for yourselves. It's easy, I know, to preach courage to others, but in writing this speech, I tried very hard to imagine what it was I wish someone had told me as I was poised to cross the stage and pick up the diploma, which signified not so much an educational achievement as it did a ticket to adulthood and independence. Look, even though you won't admit it, I'm going to say it out loud for you right now. This is a scary place to be at. You're being tired with high school, and I submit we designed it that way to make you sick and tired of it, so that you'll carry some true enthusiasm with you as you sprint to the next chunk of your life. That exhaustion with our rules and regulations and limitations and ways of treating you like the children you stopped being years ago now, it's not in and of itself enough to sustain you as you move forward into an unknown and unknowable place. You will need courage about you. You will need to be your own heroes as you forge ahead. So what does it mean to live in courage? Especially, as I've said, since the more obvious kinds of courage, i.e. the burning building, Holy Grail, Golden Fleece opportunity, is largely not ours. I think it means a few things. First, it means to open yourself up to the idea that perhaps you know nothing. Maybe you aren't as smart or as knowledgeable or as intuitive as you might want to believe. It takes real courage to go out into the world and understand about yourself that you are but a naif, a beginner, someone who has not yet had the chance to think through some of the larger problems we face as a species. It is okay. Embrace your newness in the world instead of being ashamed of it. I left for college, and since I was insecure about my hickish roots, I grew up in a very rural place, I put on an act of what I thought was sophistication and erudition, which I'm fairly sure prevented me from learning anything at school for almost a year. So busy was I at trying to convince everyone that I knew it all. When I was finally able to admit that I didn't really know much, that was my own first step toward courage. And I think it will have to be for many of you too. Living in courage also means allowing yourself to consider that the path that you think is the best one today might not be the one you end up following. In fact, it means allowing for the idea that you will likely jump paths many times before you're through, and that maybe, just maybe, you should let your heart guide you as much as you let your head do so. When I was young, everything in my heart told me I should move to California and try to get a job with Industrial Light and Magic and help create special effects for movies, which was my great passion then. And everything in my head told me I was stupid and foolish and wrong for wanting that. I do not believe in regretting, but I frequently wonder how my life might have been gone differently had I been more courageous back then. There are and there will be enormous pressures put upon you by those you know and those you don't, to be who they want you to be, to do what they want you to do. Resist these voices. Have the courage to listen to your own. Another way courage is implicated in our lives is in how we account for success, how we decide to measure our own worth in this world. Many people without courage or self-awareness seem to measure themselves and their value by how much money they make, or the title they attain at a job, or the sort of home in which they live, the brand of car they drive. And there's nothing wrong with that, I suppose. But I also know courageous people who have pushed beyond these default kinds of measurement tools and have counted themselves as successful not based on the number of dollars, but on the number of friends they have. Not on their professional perks, but on the creativity they're encouraged to cultivate and the public good they accomplish in the work that they do. Not on the square footage of a home or the horsepower of an engine, but on the largeness of a heart and the capacity both to give and to accept love. Make no mistake, to value yourself in these terms does take courage in this world. It means bucking against the media and all the images it sells to us every day about what success in this world is supposed to look like. It means also steeling yourself against your peers and maybe even against your friends. You can do it. You can decide on different criteria for success, but you will need courage to live a life that way. Here is the ultimate way to show your courage as you go forth from Lake Braddock. Have the courage to be your own harshest critic, your best and final evaluator. I fear that we have done little to prepare you in this regard. You have grown up in a time where you have been tested and measured and ranked and reduced to data more than any other group of graduates ever. You have, by this time, endured 34 SOL tests alone for an average of over 75 seat hours per student of state-mandated testing. That does not include PSATs, SATs, AP tests, or any of the ordinary tests that your teachers give you, sometimes on a weekly basis. So what? Here's what. By testing you up, down, and sideways, we have taught you that your learning will continually be subject to some external measuring device, and that you bear none of the responsibility for even thinking about your own strengths and weaknesses, the places where you need or want improvement, and the places where you are excelling, much less acting upon that thinking. This is, as I've said, our fault, and not yours. But you leave here woefully unprepared to do rigorous self-evaluation because of it. It's now up to you to find the courage to learn to do it for yourself. Do not let our nation's current mania for school testing, for reporting you simply as data points, lead you to the mistaken notion that you're free from the burden of deep, authentic self-reflection. You aren't. Ask your parents or your grandparents about their work. Ask them who it is they most need to impress, whose standards are the ones that are hardest to measure up to. I will wager that the answer each of them will give you is my own. There are certainly people in our lives we need to please in order to get along. Teachers, coaches, bosses. But none of these people knows the extent of your true potential, or they shouldn't, the way that you yourself know it. This kind of courage requires brutal honesty, painstaking integrity, and rare self-awareness. Find this courage, please. Undo the deficit that today's educational trends have left you with. Without the capacity to self-evaluate, there is no ability to determine your own direction. If we only rely on outside sources of validation, test scores, for example, or gold stars, or pats on the head, then we never develop inside ourselves the sources of inner strength, and yes, the courage that we need to drive past that initial discouragement, boredom, or frustration of not being objectively good at something right away. Something that could one day change our lives if we would only give it a chance. Test scores and ranking and data tend to push us away from what we do not immediately excel at. And if we let testing do this for us, do this to us, then we allow others in very real ways to decide our fates. My daughter, Fanula, is one of the best storytellers I have ever known, but she gets rotten spelling grades. Will she keep writing in the face of her poor language arts scores? My other daughter, Maida, has learned in 9 months to play the flute beautifully, but she says she may quit because her band grade is a 2 out of 4 because she has not memorized her scales. What do I say to her? We, your teachers, school administrators, and your parents need to demonstrate courage too. The courage to stand up against practices we know do not advance what should be the main thing in our school, student learning. And to keep pressure on decision makers to, well, to keep the main thing. That are easily tested and compared against legions of other test takers in order to establish points of pride for the test givers and lots of money for the test writers. We should be teaching you how to think, how to make sense of facts, how to build systems of analytical inquiry and innovative ways of problem solving that simply cannot be tested by standardized exams. We should be courageous enough to give you the space and the time to ask the right questions and stop attending so much to the answers that follow. We must respect the autonomy of teachers to engage students in the ways they know are best and stop insisting on orthodoxy in the name of consistency, which will, I predict, be the end of the art of teaching. This is our responsibility, our test of heroism. It gets harder every year, but we have, as do you, a duty to rise to this challenge and stand up for what we know is right. It is time to consider that maybe the sputtering, inefficient, searching, blindfolded in the dark room aspects of education need to be not merely acknowledged, but celebrated. Maybe we should stop promoting the streamlining and the routinization of education, where every teacher teaches the same lesson on the same day and uses the same grading system to assess students' work, and start embracing the ways that education is at its best, quirky and unique, admitting that each of us learns differently, the same way each teacher finds his or her passion in a different place and uses it to inspire students in ways that cannot be reproduced across the board and should not be. I'm sorry if this feels preachy to you, but I am standing in a pulpit. That something at the core of all of this matters very deeply, both in where you have come from and where you are headed. And these are, after all, the dual subjects most critical on a night like this. I am not suggesting you do not possess courage already. On the contrary, I am astounded every day by the courage so many of you already demonstrate. What forms does your heroism take? Let me share some things that my students recently wrote to me to demonstrate. Let's start with Laura Hager, who says, I hiked 127 miles this year, and I'm able to do calculus. Brave indeed, Laura, especially the calculus part. Oh, and she adds, I am worth more than any letter grade or test percentage. I used to be afraid of trying new things. Now, instead of fearing the unknown, I face it. That is courage. Gene Slack wrote, "My life should not revolve around getting external validation like grades. My reputation is nowhere near as important as my character. What others think about me should not define how I think about myself." Yes, Gene, and that is courage. Marissa Bassard said that when she was younger, she, quote, "always thought that the key to success was in earning impressive grades. However, I've learned that success really is in creating meaningful relationships with other people." And that is courage. Nan Danette wrote, "I wish I'd spent more time in high school being taught how to think for myself and how to think about and perceive things in a context larger than my immediate self. There are ways to allow students to understand that they have more value than their grades and their test scores." And that is courage. "I have learned mostly that you need to learn to love yourself and not care that much about what others think of you. If you don't do this, if you worry about what others think of you, then you won't have enough energy left to love and respect yourself." That is courage. And here's Maxwell Rushendell. He knows courage. When asked to state his high school accomplishments that made him most proud, he wrote, "Kissing a girl." And then in parentheses, cheek. Then Max said, "Coming out of my 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade selves, year after year, and being able to look back at the dried shells of my former selves, even as I admire my gooey new skin, and to be happy with each one, even as I am excited about my next shedding." That, in my book, is the epitome of courage. With something else Maxwell wrote to me. He said that there needs to be a way for school to allow us to sit down and do nothing for a spell so that we can start to think and imagine. No planning for today or tomorrow or the next day, just pondering why the grass is green or why we have accents or why cats are funny. Thoughts like these, he says, are what help us to mature and should be encouraged but never shared. I am the only one who can stop me. People can tell me to stop or put walls in my way, but it is only my own mind that gives these things their stopping power. If I don't want to be stopped by something, I simply will keep at it." Class of 2014, you have shown incredible courage, but now is the time to find even more. It is inside of you, and it is also your job to continue to draw it out. We, your parents and teachers, have done what we can to help in this process. I'm sure that we have also done things that from time to time impeded this pursuit, and all I can say is that we really had your best interests at heart. As you thank us for what we have done for you, as you have already begun to do so, please forgive us for what we have failed to do. Be strong from the inside. Feed your courage. Be the heroes of your own stories. Excelsior.